I'd like to introduce Professor Peter Boghossian, a professor at Portland State University, who wrote the wonderful book, A Manual for Creating Atheists.
And not to be confrontational, but why are you so concerned with poking holes in other people's faith?
Oh, so the question is, why am I so concerned about poking holes in other people's faith? I'm sorry if I gave that impression. I don't want to poke holes in people's faith, and I'm really sorry if I have communicated that. I want the complete and total eradication of the faith virus. The reason that I want to do that, and I articulated that in the slide, is that if everybody lived on their own island, or if we were in some kind of a matrix, but there was only one entity in the matrix, it wouldn't make any difference what people believe. But we live in a democracy. People have been hurt. I can give a wide range of social and public policies, whether it's George Bush's praying to invade Iraq. And by the way, if you've prayed to invade Iraq and you think God has told you to invade Iraq, it makes belief revision very difficult. It makes it very difficult for members of the homosexual community here. Or even at a more practical level, people like Rick Perry praying for rain. We have a crisis in this country, and the crisis is that people formulate their beliefs on something other than reason and evidence. And it really is, as my friend Stefan Milano said, it's like a backward roadmap. People think that they're helping themselves, that they're flourishing as human beings, but they're destroying their lives and the lives of their communities.
Faith-based processes are unreliable. Faith-based processes are unreliable. What do I mean by unreliable? I mean that they will decrease the likelihood that one will have true beliefs. They will decrease the likelihood that one will have true beliefs. I'm going to demonstrate this tonight by talking about various methods of reasoning. So let's think about this. Are there ways of solving problems? Are some ways of solving problems better than other ways of solving problems? Are some ways of solving problems better than other ways of solving problems? What do I mean by better? I mean that they will increase the likelihood that one will come to true beliefs. In order to answer this question, let's take a step back. Let's ask ourselves a very basic, simple question. Are there worse ways of reasoning? Are there worse ways of trying to figure out solutions to problems? Let's take a very, very simple example, the measurements of my bathroom door. So I need to figure out the measurements of the door, so that I can get a replacement door that will fit in the frame of the door. Pretty straightforward problem, pretty clear. Are there worse ways to figure out what the measurements of my door are? Yeah. Well, here's one. Ask my dog. Really? 2, divination. I'm going to take sticks, I'm going to scoop up some sticks from my backyard, I'm going to throw them up in the air, I'm going to see where they land, and I'm going to divine the answer from the sticks. It's the worst way of reasoning. Worst way of reasoning number 3. I want to figure out the measurements of my door are sacrifice a goat. Okay. Worked for the Aztecs. All right. Do people use worse ways of reasoning for themselves? Yeah, all the time. People use worse ways of conceptualizing and thinking through problems all the time. Here's one example of a worse way of thinking or a worse way of reasoning. How do we know that astrology is unreliable? Well, the answer to this is the same for virtually every slide. We look at the evidence. You want to figure something out, you look at the evidence. Here's one piece of evidence. Sharon Carlson's A Double-Blind Test of Astrology. It was published in Nature in 1985. Had 116 people, gave them the California Personality Index, asked them the date, time, and place of their birth. And guess what? Astrologers attempted to match the birth date with the personality index. Do you think that they were successful? No. Some of them were, but no more so than random chance. Here's another worse way of reasoning. Homeopathy. What is homeopathy? Well, it's a highly, highly diluted substance that's used to treat illness. Just to be clear about what I mean by highly diluted, it contains no active ingredients whatsoever. Zipperino, none. If I were to urinate in the ocean, it would be more concentrated than a homeopathic sugar pill. And some people think that it's an herbal medicine. It's not an herbal medicine. This is fantastic. This is a homeopathy emergency kit. In case there's an emergency. Well, how do we know that homeopathy is unreliable? Well, the answer is simple. You look at the evidence. Here's one piece of evidence. Homeopathy for childhood and adolescent ailments. a systematic review of randomized clinical trials from the Mayo Clinic proceedings of 2007. The evidence for this is not just suggestive, but it's conclusive. It's overwhelming. It's an unreliable process. It is not effective. Here's another worse way of reasoning: dowsing. You can douse for anything you want. You can douse for oil. You can douse for water. People have even tried to douse for elephants. Basically, here's what you do with dowsing. You have a stick in one hand, or a stick in two hands, two sticks, and then you walk around. Ooh, elephants, oil, look, dowsing for oil. And when the sticks cross, evidently that's the place that has the oil. Okay. But dowsing is unreliable. How do we know it's unreliable? Well, we examine the evidence. We look at the evidence. Here's just one piece of evidence. James Randi's An Encyclopedia of Claims, Frauds, Hoaxes, and the Occult and the Supernatural, published by St. Martin's Press in 1995. James Randi has been investigating these phenomena for decades, and he's a hero to many of us, myself included. He also offers $1 million, a $1 million prize, to anyone who can show, under proper observing conditions, evidence of any paranormal, supernatural, or occult power. Many have tried. No one has ever been successful. I will say that I'm willing to change my mind about this, provided sufficient evidence. And I always tell my students, what would it take to change your mind? Okay, what would it take to change my mind? Well, if they pass the James Randi test, that would be sufficient for me. Okay, so what can we tease out of these three examples? Astrology, homeopathy, and dowsing. Unreliable processes lead to unreliable conclusions. Unreliable processes lead to unreliable conclusions. That is, if the process one uses is unreliable, the conclusions one comes to cannot be relied upon. Cannot. For example, if one wants to cure an illness, an infection, with this homeopathic woo-woo, this will be the result. Nothing. Because it doesn't work. So let's take a look at the process of dowsing. Dowsing is unreliable. If the conclusion, think about this, the process of dowsing is me walking around trying to find dowsing. The conclusion is where the sticks cross. That's the conclusion. The process, the thing that got me there, is the actual act of dowsing. If the process that one uses to understand reality is not reliable, then every conclusion that springs from that process is also, let me hear it, excellent, unreliable. Pinning down the definition of faith. Christians in particular have employed slippery definitions with respect to the word faith since at least the time of Augustine. The word faith is in desperate need of being clarified. Currently, the definition that's currently used is belief without evidence, or something like this. Belief with insufficient evidence, belief on the basis of no evidence, etc. The definition I am proposing is pretending to know things you don't know. In fact, pretending to know things you don't know is nearly synonymous with the word faith. To be clear, I don't mean everything that's a case of pretending to know things you don't know is a case of faith, but all cases of faith are pretending to know things that you don't know. Life has no meaning without faith. I hear this all the time. You hear this? Life has no meaning without... If I didn't have faith, my life would be meaningless. This has been a theme in philosophy and literature, whether it's Tolstoy or Kierkegaard. This theme perennially emerges. Here we see the effectiveness of the proposed clarification. Think about the differences in these substitutions for a moment. From the old, unclarified definition, life has no meaning if you don't believe things without evidence, to the new, life has no meaning if you stop pretending to know things that you don't know. Clearly, the word faith is explicated in this way. It's not only more effective, but it perfectly captures the essence of what's inherently wrong with the statement. And it does so in a way that belief without evidence just doesn't. And again, one of the goals here today is to get people to think in these terms. My faith is true for me. My faith is true for me. I get this a lot from my students. Okay, let's make some substitutions, and this becomes pretending to know things I don't know is true for me. While it may be clear to many of us here today that this is false, a great many people have difficulty understanding why this is problematic. Basically, the utterer of this statement confuses the subjective and the objective. For example, the subjective with the objective. I like mustard on my hot dogs. He likes ketchup on his hot dogs. Those are subjective states. Those are preferences. There's no right or wrong in matters of taste. Objective claims are statements of fact about the world. There's another confusion about the term faith. And this is a biggie. This is one of the main deliverables today. Part 2, confusion regarding the words faith and hope. In the countless conversations that I've had, literally every single day, this is one of the perennial confusions that constantly comes up. People confuse the words hope and faith. I'll define the word hope as wanting something to happen, but knowing that there's a chance that it might not happen. If you hope for something, you want it to happen, but you understand that there's a chance that it might not come to pass. Hope is a desire. Hope is not a knowledge claim. When you hope for something, you're not making a claim about the world. Anyone can hope for anything they want. Hoping for something just means that you desire it to be the case. You can hope for world peace. You can hope that when you die, you're going to go to heaven and be with Jesus and your loved ones. You can hope that when you go home today, there'll be 72 virgins eagerly awaiting your arrival. You can hope that you're going to win the lottery with a ticket and you'll find the floor. You can hope for anything that you want. This is different, fundamentally, from faith. Faith claims are knowledge claims. Faith claims are knowledge claims. When one says one has faith in X, one is making a knowledge claim. For example, if Fred says that he has faith that Jesus walked on water, that's in Matthew 14, Fred doesn't mean that he hopes that Jesus walked on water. Fred means that Jesus actually did walk on water. Fred is making a knowledge claim. He is claiming to know that Jesus walked on water, even though he has no evidence for this. Here's a simple way to illustrate the difference between faith and hope. Let's suppose that you have an infection in your throat. You have no insurance, so you don't go to the doctor. Instead, you go to a pastor. He's a nice guy, but he has no medical training whatsoever. You ask him what he has to help your infection, and he states, Jesus Christ. You say, what evidence do you have that my infection can be cured by Jesus Christ? He responds, well, I don't have any evidence, but I hope he can cure your infection. That's hope. That's also being honest. Okay, same scenario, different word. Let's suppose you have an infection in your throat. You have no insurance, so you don't go to the doctor. Instead, you go to a pastor. It never ceases to be funny, even after like the 10th time. He's a nice guy, but he has no medical training whatsoever. You ask him what he has to help your infection, and he states, Jesus Christ. You say, what evidence do you have that my infection can be cured by Jesus Christ? He responds, well, I don't have any evidence, but I have faith that he can cure your infection. That's faith. That's your pastor pretending to know something he doesn't know. When your pastor says that he has faith, he is making a knowledge claim. He is claiming that Jesus Christ can cure you. But he's not claiming to know that Jesus Christ can cure you on the basis of the evidence. There's no way that he could know that Jesus Christ could cure you unless he had sufficient evidence to warrant belief in the claim. Your pastor, while he may be well-intentioned, is pretending to know something he doesn't know. Faith and hope are not synonyms. Yet no matter how many times I've attempted to explain this, or watched entire debates that revolve around the meanings of these words, or read about how these words are defined in context, there must be something about this that's simply too complicated, too confusing, too threatening, or too culturally entrenched for people to understand. I think this is another reason why we need to explicate faith. Pretending to know something as pretending to know something you don't know. Pretending to know something you don't know cannot possibly be confused with hope, not by anybody. There are two reasons people have these beliefs, as I mentioned in the talk. Either two epistemic reasons. They formulate their beliefs on what they think is evidence, or they formulate their beliefs on, or they have a callous disregard for evidence. Here's one strategy that I use quickly to, if I don't have a lot of time for a 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15-minute intervention, here's a quick question I'll ask. This is a variation of a philosopher, Matt McCormick's defeasibility test. How could your belief be wrong? I'll give you an example. In evolutionary biology, if you ask an evolutionary biologist like Dawkins or Jerry Coyne or what have you, well, how could your belief be wrong? They'll tell you, a Precambrian rabbit. My belief is falsified. You find me a Precambrian rabbit, we're starting back to the get. We're going all over again. Not the case with intelligent design. Here's the other thing that we need to think about. This is important. If somebody tells you that they formulate their beliefs on the basis of evidence, by definition, that means that there must be some evidence that could make them not hold the belief anymore. It's a defeasibility test. So the question is your belief defeasible, and what would that evidence look like?
If they don't say anything to that question, well, then you have to be blunt and say, well, you're claiming that's just verbal behavior. You're claiming to formulate your beliefs on the basis of evidence, but I don't think you're being sincere.
You can move beyond faith and replace it with a simple rule. Couldn't be any easier. I'm going to proportion my beliefs to the evidence. I'm going to proportion my beliefs to the evidence. Carl Sagan said it best. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. It doesn't take faith to say, I don't know. It takes humility. If you want to align your beliefs with the truth and embrace reason, then you can say no. Tonight really is a genuine opportunity for you to live a life free of delusion. Thanks.